Good evening. I thought you might like this little card that's really quick and easy. It's a card that can be used for any kind of a sentiment that's deep, even sympathy. I'm using Fabulous Florets, which is one of my favorite sets from the new catalog, and some watercolor paper that I've cut at 2¼ by 5½. The colors of inks that you choose to use are totally up to you, but I'm using garden green and rose red for my marker. So I'm just going to ink up this stamp using an ink pad. I could also have used a marker, but let's imagine I don't have a garden green marker. In that case, I can just use my pad. Now I want that flower to be colored differently though, so since I used the pad, I have to kind of erase the color off of the flower, and then I'm going to color that flower with a rose red marker. Now as you've probably noticed, I really love working with markers, but you may not always have all the markers you need, so you can mix your pads with your markers in this case. Also love the new Smooch Schmidt Spritz. This is the vanilla, and I'm going to spray that onto the wet ink, being careful to stamp over a box so I don't get it on everything. And with that flower just damp, I'm going to stamp it down on the watercolor paper. When I stamp on watercolor paper, I'm aware that the transfer of ink takes a little bit longer than regular paper, so I'll let it sit for a minute, a little bit longer than I would with standard paper. Now some people like to spritz again after they've inked it because it would soften any white areas. I like to accentuate these white areas and the stems with a little bit of glitter pen by Sakura. It just adds a special sparkle that catches the eye, but it isn't like wow, wow glitter. It's very gentle. And I think it's a good idea whenever you're doing a two-tone card just to add a little bit of sparkle. Dazzling Diamonds helps in that area too. So while that's drying over on the side, I'm going to pull out a strip of 6x6 crumb cake paper that has been scored at 3 inches. And then I'm going to turn it so that I'm on the front of the card. So because the card is going to be folded in half, I only want to cut on the front. And by pulling my cutter all the way up to the point where I want to start cutting, notice that there's arrows on your cutter. You can push from there and then push over to the next 1/8 inch mark at the end. And then just make sure you lift it up before you move the paper, because you can cut again by accident. So start it and then push down and push up to the point where you'd like your slit to end. So I have about 1/8 of an inch on both sides of the paper, but you could make it less of a slit. You can't see the slit right now, but I am actually using my Stamp-A-Majig. I've pre-stamped the slit in order to stamp my sentiment right between the two slits that I just made. I find that there's no better way to do this than using the Stamp-A-Majig. However, if you're using clear mount stamps, which I'm not doing here, this actually might be a lot easier to just stamp using the clear mount stamp. So since I'm using wood stamps, the only way I would do this is with a Stamp-A-Majig. So now the sentiment is stamped right between the two slit lines. And this is an old stamp. It's one of my old favorites, so I don't think you can order this set. It was called Hard to Say. But what you want to do is you want to use a 1 or 2 line sentiment with this card design. I'm assuming you could actually make it taller, but you might be hiding a lot of your watercolor image if you had it a lot thicker. So I'm going to check and make sure that the watercolor fits, and if it does, great. Now I could stop here, but I've decided to add a little bit of paper piercing. And sometimes I like to paper pierce to add a little bit more to a simple card design. And it's really easy to do. What you need to remember is when you're using your piercing template that comes in your mat pack with your paper piercer, you want to just keep that on top of the spongy mat and lined up on the edge of the mat so that you don't have a crooked line. Just be careful to keep going along the edge with the same amount of pressure also as you pierce. And then line it up as you move it over. Make sure you're using the sponge underneath. Don't let your piercing occur in the air. Just make sure it stays on the sponge. and just line up your first two paper pierces on your continuation with the last two. That way you're sure your spacing between the holes are going to be perfect. Always overlap at least one of your previous holes when you're moving down a long line. You can even do this on a scrapbook page. It's a really nice way of adding an extra dimension to any strip on your scrapbook page. You can even combine them, like you can do two lines of paper piercing right next to each other, skip an inch and do two lines more to give you even type of a pattern to paper pierce. Some people actually will stamp a flourish first on the back of a cardstock and then follow the stamp outline for your paper piercing, then turn it back over. And you can use, therefore, you can use flourishes to create a pattern of paper piercing. Maybe I'll do that in the next couple of videos coming up, but it's really fun to really explore paper piercing. So I fast forwarded here a little bit, so you missed a little bit of that, but it's a really relaxing, easy thing to do. Just keep it lined up. So I'm going to put a little bit of adhesive on the back of this just so it doesn't move around in case I'm going to mail this. Some other designs that I have done is instead of paper piercing the base, I have paper pierced around the watercolor instead. And so that gives it a different look, so you might want to try that. So I'm just placing it down and making sure that it's the distance I want from the row of paper piercing. And then I push down because the adhesive is already on the back. And then I fold it in half. And basically that's your card. It's a really clean and simple design. It's nice for I'm sorry, for sympathy, for encouragement. I like the softness of it. And how you approach these colors will brighten it or soften it. So thanks for coming today. It's been a lot of fun to do this clean and simple card with you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.